Hi there, and welcome to the Systematic Review and Map Methods course. In this session, we're going to be talking about how you can communicate the results of a systematic review or map. So this is the final step, and it's possibly one of the most important steps. It's not just enough to assume that because you've published your systematic review in a journal article, it's going to get read by the right people and the results of your review are going to find their way into the appropriate level of decision making. So it's really important to spend time thinking about who you want to communicate your results with and what forms of communication are right for different groups of people. So we've finished our review. This is an example of one, but we might find that that review is particularly long, uses a lot of complex terminology. People who read this and want to find a result might get bogged down in the methods section or bits of the results that aren't relevant to them. So we really need to think carefully about how we want to translate different messages within our review for different target audiences. So some of the other ways that you might think about communicating your results include things like traditional journal articles, academic journal articles where you discuss your review in other contexts. You could summarize your review for commissioners or funders or for other forms of research audiences. You could summarize your reviews very briefly in policy briefs or fact sheets. And you might do this in terms of a document or a video. Videos themselves are a really diverse group of communication media that you might want to use. And we'll talk about those a bit as well. Press releases, perhaps less common these days, but university communications departments almost always have communications people who can help you form a press release. Social media is a very common way of networking with particularly other researchers, but it might be a really useful way of reaching practitioners as well. And the general public. And then stakeholder workshops can be really useful, and we'll come on to discuss this as well. So we're just going to take some time to run through each of these in turn. This is an example of a traditional academic article that was published off the back of a systematic review. It was looking at how effective greening of urban areas is in reducing exposure to humans of ground level ozone concentrations, UV, and the urban heat island effect. So following on from this systematic review, the authors published a review article that summarized the review. It was in the days before the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence had its own dedicated academic journal, but that was able to reach a specific target audience within the landscape and urban planning community. Whereas the people who read environmental evidence might be more oriented towards environmental management and conservation. So it's worth thinking about whether you can pitch the message from your review, some of the findings in general, to a different audience. Perhaps you want to set them in the context of policy in a particular subject area or research or practice, and there might be different journals that are suitable for different audiences in that way. So another way is to summarize your review. Often reviews themselves will be tens of pages long and then have a lot of additional files within them. And you might want to summarize this in a short executive summary or summary document that has the key findings and perhaps doesn't go into so much detail about the methodology, but then links to resources where you can read more about the methodology in detail. So on the right, there's a screenshot of an EVM summary report, and these are typically 12 to 16 pages long, and executive summaries are typically somewhere around 4 to 10 pages long. Policy briefs or fact sheets are another way of presenting data in a very short and snappy way. Sometimes these might be targeted towards policy makers, but sometimes they might be targeted more towards practitioners or other forms of decision makers, and it really sets out the key messages in a very easy to read, quick and easily understandable way, so it avoids a lot of complex issues and complex terminology. Press releases typically explain a concept in an understandable way. It can be quite difficult to write a press release in a way that doesn't cause journalists or the people reading the release to get confused about a finding particularly from a systematic review. So it's important to work closely with people who've written press releases before, and communication experts are really good at this. And those press releases then get put online, they get sent to specific press organizations and distributed across their networks. Another way to get people's attention is by videos. This video, which is 4.5 minutes long, summarizes the findings of the biomanipulation review that we've had in several examples so far in this course. You can find it on the EBM website. And it summarizes the problem. There are interviews with various scientists on the project, and it's quite a digestible, easily understandable media for getting to grips with the findings of the review. You could also produce much shorter videos, and we use this within the Stockholm Environment Institute on Twitter. So we would produce short videos of maybe 30 seconds to 2 minutes long. Typically interviews with people, you can shoot them on your iPhone, they're very easy to produce, and it's just a different way of getting key messages across. There are various social networks that are specifically designed for research audiences, like ResearchGate, Academia.edu. LinkedIn is more professional audiences, perhaps practitioners, depending on your discipline. Twitter is really diverse, so there's lots of different groups on Twitter. It depends who you connect with and what networks you use. And Facebook, of course, most people are familiar with that, much more of a social network. But you could use these social networks to link to the protocol and the final review documents. You can use them also to post calls for evidence to be submitted during your review, if you have a call for grey literature, for example, or if you have any questions that stakeholders might be able to help you out with. You could use it for polls, and polls can be another way of advertising the findings of your review. If you ask people to think about what their opinion is on a certain factor or intervention, and then you can link to your review to show what the evidence says. And you can also use these networks to create and curate mailing lists of people who you could directly email and send messages to with links to your review. Stakeholder engagement is a really important way of reaching people who would read and use your study findings as well. And what you might want to do here is to organize a specific release event where you gather important stakeholders together, or stakeholders who you think would be really interested, and then present your results and give them the opportunity to discuss and comment, communicate their feelings about your results. It's a very good way to directly pass information over to people in a very active way. So that's it for this presentation. Hopefully I've shown that because systematic reviews and maps are long technical reports and they're quite difficult to digest, that it's really important to communicate them in a way that's tailored and understandable for them. There are a diversity of ways to summarize the main findings of a review that include things like scientific articles, policy briefs, videos, summary reports, social networks, and really the sky's the limit here. So if you come up with any way of presenting your results that are attractive to the right audience, then that's a great thing. And that by using stakeholder engagement, in particular using it in release events, you can really target your end users, but also use stakeholder engagement to tailor the outputs of the review. So if you ask your stakeholders which kind of format for communication they might find the most attractive, that might give you an indication of where you can put your resources. And by involving them and engaging with them, they might be more inclined to help spread the word and pass those reviews on because they feel included.